my awareness was, for me, that just the healing aspects are speeding up, and they're coalescing into just sort of more usable, more functional, you know, a culmination. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so it's just an observation. So if you have any comments about that, I'd be open.
Well, there's a thing when people put themselves into illusion, we often say, just because we want it to be so doesn't make it so, but it inclines us to see it so. But the reverse of that is also true, which is sort of saying, the more we see it so, the more it is so. So, we could think of the more I see it so, I mean, I just keep hold of seeing it that way. Yes, but even more powerfully, I said it the wrong way, but saying, if you see it from the more, spiritual healing works very much under a principle of seeing the thing in its pure state, seeing it as it truly is. And the more you see it as it truly is, whatever that thing is will be, it's almost like physical follows energetic, and energetic follows consciousness. Consciousness follows the level of what we call intentionality, and God is intention. So the more you tap the level of intentionality and you know that person as they're intended by God, intended by their own soul, and then the more you know that, and then you see that, and you share that, not necessarily even verbally, it invites them to return to that which is they're meant to be. So, if we look at a consciousness of another person from beyond time and space, so we're looking into the realness that they exist in beyond time and space, and we know them and see them in that, then that can translate across, and that's why in the Bible it says, in a twinkling of an eye. Something can it's gone. We do sharing sometimes at the Living Grace and stuff like that. Somebody get up there with this real bad pain, and we talk from and say, "Oh, how's it?" "Oh." You say, "Well, it's a minute." And they got up there and they had pain. They go, "I don't know, maybe a one." What happened? They were just seeing. This is my understanding about what's happening. But in a sense, the spirit was just basically coming in there and on a level of intentionality, reaffirming the truth of their purpose and their intentionality, and it caused all the other levels to ripple into an alignment with it, and that which was not in alignment with it fell away. And I think you're doing something along that line of knowing it so, which is making it so.
Definitely know the aspect. If I see them in their perfection, then, as you just said, the stuff that's not the perfection can fall away.
Right. It's the seeing that is really the knowing. See, it's like when we talk about spiritual sight. It's when we're doing clairvoyance, utilizing the sensing capacities of the astral body, the causal body, the mental body, the etheric double. We can see it, we hear it, we sense it, feel it, and we get impressions, and that information we use and utilize or share, and we use it in healing for sure. But above that, into the soul, and then even more into the spirit, seeing is really a knowing. We use the word seeing as a descriptive, but it's really something you know. Why? Because God knows itself. And so in knowing itself, it knows what is not of itself. So spiritual healing is just to know a thing in itself sufficiently that it activates within the individuation that same knowing of itself. I used to experience a thing watching, I didn't know that I experienced it, it's just something I recognized when I'd watch John Roger with people, working with him. It was like he would address them with such a knowing of who they really were that it would activate within them that knowing of who they really were. And within all that, it would automatically start to shift away all those things that were not that. Like, carving the statues of Michelangelo, he just cut away everything that wasn't that. That's a way of describing what was going on. So if he addressed you and he said, he was just knowing you as the soul, knowing you as an embodiment of God's love, after a while you'd start to know yourself as embodiment of that. And everything that was in contradiction to that had no place. But it seems like you're getting into that more and more as an adjunct to everything else you do, which is perfect because it's an adjunct to every form of healing. Whether we're chiropractors or acupuncturists or counselors or consultants, that level of knowing brings an activation and brings healing support to anything else you're doing. That's in the Bible word. All right, in the Bible, Jerry used to say, I could stand up here and say the same thing over and over again. I could say ham and eggs, and the same thing would happen. Could stand up there in the knowing, and the knowing was pulling everybody else into the knowing. Well, many times what was going on in the conversation was almost entertainment and distraction to hold the conscience steady, to facilitate the action. So it's a very similar process, or the same process I suspect it's activating in your work through your own awakening, through your own coming into clarity. And it's just something that's available through every form. Counseling, even as a friend. You can do it through art.
Yeah, when you said the divine design, that lecture, I heard that in there.
Yeah, that is in that. Yeah. There's, I haven't talked a lot about that, but Plato talked about, he called the doctrine of forms. He was really talking about that if we took a horse, there is that which is the essence of horse. And that you can know that, and if you knew that. And so in part of his philosophical work, he was trying to get to the essence of things to truly know what a thing was. Now, in metaphysical books, sometimes fantasy novels and the spiritual practice said, well, if you really know the true name of a thing, you have power over it. But the true name of a thing is the divine design of it. So when you're truly on the true name of a thing, in a sense, you're in that which brought it into being or created it. And so, in a sense, that's its name. So what we're really saying is, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And then the Word came and dwelt among us. And if we took Genesis, in the beginning was the Word. First there was darkness on the face of the deep, and God spoke and said, let there be light, and all things came into being. So we're talking about the power of the Word, or the power of the name, but we're really talking about this intrinsic fundamental intention. God is intention. So what are we? We are manifestations of God's intent. But each little manifestation of God's intent, this is where differentiation comes in even to the higher things. Because the differentiation in intent. And so differentiating down in intent, and now it's this kind of flower instead of that kind of flower. It's a horse. It's a palomino horse. It's a different horse. It's a cow. It's a dog. So these are just subtle differentiations. Now, people look at it physically and say, well, that's like differentiations in the genetic code. Well, as above, so below. So the genetic code then is a so below manifestation of the higher code. What's the higher code? It's the divine design. So Plato was intuiting that and recognizing that and trying to talk about it in a way that would help catch people to the knowing of the divine design. So in this class, the way of God's remembrance, awakening to the one that is, a lot of it is supporting the consciousness to come back into the remembrance of the one that is, that we all come from, but also of the divine design that the one that is created, which is this creation. So we're individuations of God sent down out of that. Well, down was talk about it as an up-down thing, though it's not, but as into this that is the created form, which is the divine, which is so. And you say, well, what have we come to learn through going over all this? Well, if we're to awake, what are we to figure out now to come to this? Well, what we really come to learn is to learn the divine design that underlies the form and function of all this. It's like in the movie The Matrix, where he suddenly wakes up and he sees all the code. It's the divine design. But what happens is when we start to really come into the remembrance, that remembrance of God, which means it's like we know the Creator. And suddenly, if we know the Creator, we know the creation. And so suddenly that higher intelligence of God comes to us, and it helps us to know the divine design. And it, not just in the world and how it works, but in every individuation, which includes every person. And in a sense, so it's like this ability, in a sense, to know and so in a sense you could say you would then know the name of every you would know the true name of every person, because you would know the one who named them. And so in knowing the same, so in a sense, knowing the true name of that person and truly knowing as God know it, and you say, well, it gives you power, but well, it gives you the power to call it forward. So the biblical example of that is Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb. He brought him back into life by calling the divine name, which activated the divine design, which activated a return to the intention of God in that design, which reactivated and reinstituted the life force that is the so below to the above of God's design, and comes forward automatically, and he came back to life. The same principle applied when he did healing. You make the blind man see, you make this person walk, just go into the divine design. And then in a sense, reactivate that as above, so below, and it would be so. And that's how it's done. But the key of it is coming into the remembrance of what is, and remembrance of God, and then within it the remembrance of God's purpose in the design. Because to truly understand the divine design is to understand the why of God. And the thing is, if we understand our whole sojourn into all this, then we go, oh, well, now it starts to make sense why we would come down here and put up with all this. Because we're learning the divine design. That's why the whole emphasis in the Christ action is towards the learning rather than the balancing. Because the balancing pulls all your consciousness into this that is effect. But the Christ is always supporting us to fulfill God's intention for us, which is to make the link between this and the divine design, and to discover the divine design within all of this. So it's like we're on a treasure hunt. The treasure is God, the person. And where did God hide his treasure? God hid his treasure in this. His treasure is the divine design.